There's a funny story about my relationship with Ted, and he was at Warner Brothers at the time, of course the label that we did much of the Dio work with. And Ted, as you've suggested, is, has quite a reputation. We'd started the project. We were probably a month into it. We got a call from someone at Warner Brothers who said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're doing the album that we owe you." Because to explain that a little bit further, when we re-signed with Black Sabbath with Warner Brothers yet again, they insisted that they sign me to a solo deal as well. So I guess that meant they liked me quite a bit. So I had a solo album all ready to go, and I mean a contract ready to go. So when the time came, I took advantage of that, went into the studio and started, and as I say, a month later we got a call, Ted needs to speak to you about what you're doing. So I went to the studio, or to Warner Brothers at 10 o'clock in the morning, which seemed a very ungodly hour to me, seeing we were spending a lot of time in the studio. And we were there at 10, and Ted wasn't. And Ted came wandering in and said, "Who called this meeting at 10 o'clock? And I said, "Well, it wasn't me, Ted." He said, "So why are we here?" I said, "Well, because I'm doing an album for you." And he said, "Oh, right. And he said, "Who's producing it?" And I said, "I am." And he said, "Well, go produce it then." That was it. So I got, a complete okay from Ted, who was a musician and, a lot of simpatico that way. So it was great. Never heard another word from them until they heard someone wander down to the studio one day after a couple of months of work and heard the song Rainbow in the Dark. And that opened the floodgates, and they went, "Oh, I think we have something here, don't we?" Well, I always knew we had something there, but I guess we needed to wake them up. But that was what happened with Ted. Rainbow in the Dark was not my favorite song. I felt it was too poppy. After all, I've just come from Black Sabbath, and you can't get any heavier than that. And that's the kind of music I really loved. And I just thought it was a little bit sing-songy and a bit poppy. And I thought we had better choices. So I was about to put a razor blade to the tape and destroy it. And they talked me out of it. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. And it turned out to be a great song, and it's heavy enough. I felt more liberated on this project in all ways. I think lyric writing, was one of them, that I could do whatever I wanted to, and no one could or would tell me what to do. But I never had that problem before. I didn't have that problem in Rainbow, and I didn't have that problem in Black Sabbath. So it really wasn't a problem for me at all. I didn't feel that I now was let off the leash, so to speak. But certainly, in hindsight and in the back of my mind, I'm sure that it had some bearing on the situation, knowing that I could do whatever I wanted to do. But it never was a problem before, and it didn't turn out to be a problem this time. I think writing in a fantasy manner is my natural instinct. As a child, I read an awful lot. And I think most of the things I read were novels that really led me down that path. I read a lot of Walter Scott things, a lot of science fiction by great science fiction writers who cloak a lot of the things that they do in fantasy as well. And I think that early reading pattern and the idea that I knew that to be successful you have to be a little bit different than anyone else. So I wanted to use really the same subjects that everyone talks about these days, but put them in a different way, put them in a different time perhaps, let people use their imagination, because that's what those books did for me. It made me conjure up the image of a dragon, which we've never seen, we'll never see. Thinking of knights of the Round Table, the wonderful attitude of chivalry, good things, and then of course there was the dark side of it too, and without darkness there is no light. So again, the early reading and the thought that I must be different, I have to do this differently than anyone else has, led me down that path, and that's why I wrote that way, and that's why I continue to. I think sometimes people have to do that, but what I've tried to do is I've tried to write so that many people can have different ideas about what that song is. The song Rainbow in the Dark, for example, I'll have 10 people give me 10 different attitudes of what that song is about. So I've accomplished what I've set out to do. I've made them think, and I've made that song their song, because I'm writing for them. I'm sometimes writing about them too, but I'm writing for them. And I usually have a tendency to write more for the downtrodden than anyone else. Not being the tallest individual on the face of the planet, I know what it's like to be looked down upon by tall people, and not just because they're higher than I am, but there's a stigma that comes with being too fat, too short, too tall, too everything. And I've always felt that people have suffered because of that, and I wanted them to know that, hey, look what I did. I overcame it all. It didn't matter to me. It never bothered me. I didn't care about stature. All I cared about was what was inside the package. And so I think that writing that way made people have to use their imagination and also understand that I was writing a song for them, and make it your own. The artwork on the Holy Diver album was meant to have people ask the question, why do you have a monster drowning a priest? So that my reply could be, how do you know it's not a priest drowning a monster? And certainly in this day that we live in, priests have a little bit of a monster image now, I think. So maybe I knew more than I thought at that point. But the whole idea was, as I mentioned before, look inside the package before you make a determination as to what's in it. And that means look at the heart of the person, look at the spirit of the person before you condemn them for something that you don't know. So yes, I wanted it to be controversial. Controversy also sells too. And you have to be a businessman at some point as well. I think Holy Diver took people by surprise. I think maybe because it had so many great songs on it. It's almost one of those perfect albums. I've been involved, I think, in 3 perfect albums in my mind, anyway. One to me, was the second Rainbow album, which was called Rainbow Rising. The first Black Sabbath album that I did with the band, Heaven and Hell, and this one. And each one of them was almost a flagship for a generation of people. It happened almost 10 years apart, and it hearkened in a new generation of rock fans. So I've been very fortunate with that. And I think it did surprise people, but it didn't surprise me because it was so chock full of good songs. I just think, again, it was surprising because it was such a good album. Wow, where did that come from? I think it was stunning. But it proved itself to be the winner that I expected it to be. Actually, I'll say that that's not true. It proved itself to be the winner that everyone else expected it to be. I was very concerned that it was not going to be successful because a lot of the onus was on me. After all, I did put my name on it. I had come from success before it, and I had remembered the first Rainbow album that I did with Ritchie Blackmore, and he was the same as I was for the Dio, making the release of the Dio album. He thought, gee, I hope this works, whereas all the rest of us in the band said, this is a great album. And he had some misgivings about it, just as I did. But they convinced me that it was going to work, and obviously people convinced me that it did work. I don't think it was expected to have a big production from us. No, I think what they expected was to hear those songs played by the great people who played them. But I wanted to always give something more. And I had always been well enamored with what Alice Cooper had done. I loved his stage shows. They were just so enthralling to me. And I wanted to carry that on. And I always felt that giving people more than they got from anyone else, especially with the ticket prices going up so much, was a boon to them. And it made me feel good about what we were doing.